And back home here, thousands of federal employees receiving pink slips this week. What do we mean? Well, as President Trump takes a sledgehammer to the government as it tries to cut costs, and workforce administration officials are defending its latest cuts to federal agencies, including the CDC, Homeland Security, and the Department of Health and Human Services. This as unions and federal workers affected by these massive cuts are rallying for support. Layoffs are not based on poor performance, saying, quote, there's no evidence these employees were anything but dedicated public servants. So what do you say about these layoffs now that they are actually going into effect, Taryn?
Well, I think there's two things. One is the most basic of all is that they don't have the power to do this. This is a constitutional crisis from that perspective. But I think more importantly, I want to look at the bigger issue here is the effect that it can have in that year and a half that Janelle's like, oh, don't worry about it, right? It's just a year and a half, and it's going to get us back on track. But our national security is what I am worried about the most. Let's take a look at some of the cuts that happened on Thursday at the Nuclear Security Safety Administration. They had cuts there, and they didn't realize that they fired people who were in charge of our nuclear stockpile. Okay, this is something we just had. You just reported on some horrific international news here about things that are happening. There is nothing I want more than to make sure that the people who are overseeing our nuclear stockpile, that we've got that on lockdown, that we are not firing people. Then after they fired them, they rescinded these because they realized they'd messed up, but they couldn't reach the people because they had left them the pink slips and they had taken away their access to their computers. Well, then they couldn't figure out how to get them back. This is not what we need. This is not what anyone was looking for when you're talking about government efficiency. That's actually the opposite of government efficiency. And it's taking our eye off the game, which is keeping Americans safe, trying to put more money back in their pockets. That's what you guys were talking about. Instead, we're laying off people willy-nilly. And then the money and the cost of trying to rehire these people is actually a waste of resources. And first, very most important thing is we don't have the power to do that in the first place. Only Congress does.
It happens with this void. So, Taryn, I'll give it to you. What do you think happens with all these programs that USAID was responsible for around the world, saving lives? Who's going to fill that?
There absolutely, at this point, is no one to fill that void. That's the answer. There's nothing. And that means that people are going to unfortunately not be saved. What does that mean? That means that there are people whose lives are in danger. That means that when I just talked about this part about our nuclear safety, we are at risk. That means that we are risking lives. I mean, and that is a very serious thing. And what you weren't acknowledging, Janelle, and what we're not acknowledging is that those jobs were obviously important because you went back and offered them back to people. So these decisions are not being made with thought out things. There's a whole bunch of information that's come out about USAID that shows that much of what was coming out of the White House wasn't true. There were factual misperceptions and just outright lies about what they were saying about USAID's programs. So I think some of this is just, we need to get the truth out. We need to be honest and transparent because that's how government works best. And we are endangering lives when we don't do this the right way.
Ladies, thank you so much for weighing in today. We are out of time. Janelle King and Taryn Rosenkranz. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Have a great Saturday, of course. 1/4 past the hour.